Good morning.
Good day. How are you?
Very well, Ed. Look, it's not even 7 a.m. here in Australia. I'm in South Australia,
Very good.
um, near Adelaide, and so I'm gonna have to get some caffeine into me, Ed.
I think that's good. I'm on my third cup today. So,
I have to say this is absolutely fantastic to connect with you, and I've watched one or two of your podcasts, and I'm very excited about this conversation we're about to have.
well,
So.
thank you. Thank you. I'm always fascinated by who shows up, and I'm never disappointed. And just so that you understand what we're doing, this is very free flowing and it's very unscripted, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. And
Well, I hope what you want to talk about as well, Ed.
I don't have an agenda. My
Hmm.
agenda is to listen to you and respond to you because
Right.
I want I want my viewers to meet you is in essence. They
Yeah.
already know me, but they're meeting you may probably for the first time.
Hmm.
And and so that's important for them to see who you are. But also that they see two people who have never talked with one another have a deep and meaningful conversation together, and
Yeah.
and that has shown that has been told to me as something very special. So so yeah, that's what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Well, and I welcome that. I think that that resonates deeply with me. I like random discussions because it gets my brain going. And my brain likes to be thrown in at unusual and unexpected places. Uh, and I revel in that. I actually enjoy it. So when you said we'll talk whatever we want to talk about, I thought, okay, well, I haven't really prepared. I mean, um, I've got my
I didn't want
usual.
you to prepare. I didn't want you to prepare.
Yeah, I knew
I want
that. I
this to
knew
be
that.
very natural. So
Yeah.
so here's what we'll do. I'm going to ask you who you are,
Okay.
and you can describe that and something that you will say will trigger a question from me, and
Yeah.
that's how we get started.
Yeah. Okay. Righto.
All
Let's
right.
go.
So here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Eric? Eric?
Arek. 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 Yeah, Arek. Yes. But
And
in its original language, it's Arek.
Eric.
Yeah. In the Armenian language, the stress is put on the second syllable.
How about that?
Yeah. How about
I've already
that?
learned something.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was going to be one of your questions, right?
Yeah, well, yes, it was. I'm always interested. Well, because Eric, there's so many different names today, and I'm not talking about everybody has their own name. That's not what I'm talking about. But the source of the name, the different languages, the different cultures, um, it's a big issue for the host of a podcast to welcome that person and get their name right, because
Yeah.
to get it right is a way of respecting them as
Yeah. And I
so
appreciate that. Yep.
so Eric, let's find out who are you, and
Who am
how
I?
did we get connected together?
Yes, I've through my mentoring activities, I have met some wonderful people. As you can imagine,
Oh
mentors
yeah.
want to help others. They are my kind of people, and I met Lisa, um, who's also a mentor of young people in Sydney or in Australia. That's how we met, and we've made a huge, very deep connection. We're not just friends, we share deep and meaningful ideas and concepts, and and it was no surprise, therefore, to me when she said she spoke to you and she said, Eric, you're going to find a real kindred spirit. You're going to find a man who's truly interested in all the things that you are interested in. I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic conversation, and that's why I'm here. And who am I? Look, having said that, my name is an Armenian name. I'm not a very nationalistic person. I don't believe in nationalism. What I'd really believe in and who I am, Ed, is I'm a humanist. I'm a human being and I care about humanity, deeply care about it, and therefore it worries me to see humanity in trouble at times like this, for instance. But humanity has always been in trouble at some point or another. You know, there've been world wars and there've been famines and there've been uh, pa pandemics and all sorts of things that have challenged humans. And at this stage, there are a number of things that challenge me. And as an individual, I try to do all I can. I'm a father of two young men. That's another aspect of my life. I'm a retired engineer, but I still keep working in the area of my interest and my expertise, which is climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and the sort of the technical and administrative issues related to reducing greenhouse gases around the world. I'm on a list of international experts for the United Nations, and I still advise the Australian government on our emission reduction schemes, etc., and how we can do our bit to reduce global emissions. So there's the technical aspect of me. There's the father, the humanist, and an author. I've written a couple of books. I'm writing my third or my second novel. I've written a book on climate change and the denial of climate science. Last year I published my first novel, and I'm very excited about that because since childhood I've always wanted to write stories, but stories with meaning, stories with heart, stories with a core of an issue that perhaps I'd like humanity to address. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I could go on and on and on, but here I am.
When did how do I ask this question? Did you did you grow up in Australia or did you immigrate to Australia?
Oh God, here we go. That's another layer, and that's the subject of my second novel, which I'm fictionalizing the historical aspects of fictionalizing these historical aspects of the Armenian genocide.
Hmm.
Now, not many people know about it, and when I tell people, they say, "Look, Eric, we need to know more about that because of what's happening around the world as we speak."
Agree.
So, to answer your question, I migrated to Australia when I was 14. Now, wait for it, and I migrated from Egypt. Now, my father, at the age of 4, ended up in Egypt as an orphan because of the Armenian genocide. And
Huh.
that's the journey, if you like, of Arik, the Armenian. I mean, I went to Armenian school in Egypt. I had Armenian friends. I didn't even have an Egyptian friend, so I didn't have a very Egyptian life. It was a very, very Armenian upbringing. But we migrated here when I was 14. So I got educated here, 2 degrees in engineering, and a wonderful life here, really. I've had a fantastic life. I've done so many things that I've wanted to do that I've wanted to put my energies and my heart into. Yeah.
Australia seems to be one of these rare places where wherever you're from, you can find a home. Is
That's
that correct?
absolutely, it is correct. There are times when we struggle with the multiculturalism. Needless to say, because you're trying to combine and find cohesion. between these different cultures and different religions and different ways of living and thinking and doing things. But I assimilated and my family assimilated very, very quickly. Um, Although I'm not religious, I think Christianity helped because Armenians are devout Christians. And at least there was that connection. At least we were not seen as others in terms of our religious alignment.
I, I think that there is, I mean, I've met a lot of people from around the world and I've traveled quite a bit. And what I find is that our similarities are actually greater than our differences, and that our differences are really used against us so that it enables people who are in power to secure their power and to remain in power. But in reality, we have so much more in common that if we were just to allow ourselves to have coffee
That
together every week, we would find that there's a whole lot that we could be doing together to make it a better world.
Well, you've hit another one of my passions. Yes, because as an immigrant to a Anglo-Saxon culture, I had to assimilate, and I found that very easy to do because, as you said, and I have traveled also a lot. You hit the nail on the head. We have so much more in common. And in fact, what I find exciting is our differences. I find our differences exciting
Yeah,
rather than confronting or conflicting with my points of view. Because as I travel around the world, I find out that the vast majority of people just want to have a peaceful, meaningful, life of love and connection and and it's absolutely what's the right word? Very upsetting. I'm trying to find a word for very upsetting. This really disturbing how our differences are used to create unnecessary conflict
yeah.
for political purposes. And I actually believe, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because in your discussions, you talk a lot about the necessities of good leadership. And I think good leaders connect people rather than disconnect people. Good leaders take us to a better place. I don't mean physical, well, maybe physical as well, but to take us to elevate us even beyond our own
Yeah.
thoughts and values, etc. To take us to a better place where we are in more harmony with our fellow men and women and everybody else. So it's really disturbing, and what I'm finding around me today, and even in Australia, we had that horrific event recently where two crazy people went on a rampage of killing people, and now this is being used, unfortunately, to create even instead of treating this as a huge tragedy. It's now become a major political, cultural, social uh, disconnect, and it's just terrible, really terrible. It really disturbs me.
Well, they're taking advantage of the situation, and we have a lot of that going on in America,
Yeah,
and
of
I
course.
think
Yeah.
many of us believe that these are not random events, but very
Mm.
intentionally planned and coordinated events that um, place people in a very divided place with their neighbors or with even with their families, and it's very difficult to overcome that.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that well, I'm writing two books actually. The other book that I started some time ago is about connection
Uh-huh.
and the importance of connection. And this applies to corporations as well as individuals. I know you're interested in leadership in corporates as well, Ed. So
Right.
and I have been as well because working in climate change, I found that unless a corporation, and I advised corporates as a consultant on change management because change is not only is it a constant, but change is frightening to a lot of people. We avoid change as much as we can. We like normality. We like the usual. We like to do, we brush our teeth the same way every morning or every night. We like to do normal things that we are accustomed to, and change is therefore can be frightening. Now, what has this got to do with connection then? Well, I think we are well, humans. I think are obviously social animals, and we need to be connected. And we connect usually with people we have a lot of things in common with. Um, and we like to connect with people who think the way we do. So we like normal activities and normal thoughts and normal processes. And that's why we connect with people who are like-minded, etc. And it's when we are disconnected. I mean, these crazy people who go out there and do silly, crazy, horrible things are disconnected people. That's what it is, and they're feeling. And unfortunately, what's labeled as populist politics, relies on that. And I'm not going to mention the names of populist politicians around the world who rely on telling people, particularly disconnected people, say, no, I'm going to look after you. I'm going to look after the common people. I'm not part of the elite of politicians that are, in this high area of political privilege, and they rely on this populistic way of saying to people, I'm gonna look after you, and unfortunately, social networking doesn't help there as well because people think they are connected, but they're not. Let's be honest. You know, to and to rely on people I hardly know to give me affirmation and confirmation of my value system is just crazy. That's just not going to connect me with the rest of the world at all. And it's a sort of a false sense of connectivity to think that I'm going to get 5,000 likes on Facebook and that's going to make me feel better about myself. It just doesn't work. What I find, when I mentioned Lisa, I am deeply connected with people like Lisa who are actually doing things, doing positive things, thinking positively and have ethical, moral, and philosophical strength and integrity, and that's what I really care about.
She mentioned, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but she mentioned an organization or a movement or program that you all are a part of, and and another person that she's introduced me to is also a part of this. I'm blanking on the name. I apologize for that. But do you know what she's talking about?
Yes, yeah, well, it's a very wonderful foundation called the Raise Foundation,
Okay.
uh,
Can you tell
and
us about?
and
Can you tell us
yeah,
about this? And yeah.
yeah, and they well, um, I got introduced to the whole foundation through another person, and I really like the idea of helping young people. And I think, oh well, because Ed, my childhood was so simple. Well, I think it was anyway. Very simple. I just went to school, played ball, learned a little bit about mathematics and history and language, and I came home, had dinner, went to bed, went to school again the next day. It was such a simple life.
Right.
I didn't even have television until I was 13, for heaven's sake, and we certainly didn't have the internet, computers and smartphones, all of that. So I think, and having raised two young men in my life, I think children growing up in this very complex, complicated world, and if I thought as a gray-haired, well, actually, I don't have much hair anymore. As a gray-haired person, if I can do something to help young people in my tiny, small way, it would be great. So the Race Foundation is great because they've got a fantastic training program for mentors like me. The training was absolutely rigorous, complete, comprehensive. Of course, safety of the person, confidentiality, all of those sort of things are just drummed into us. And I've learned so much from it. I've learned, I'm a much, I mean, at my age, for heaven's sake, at my age, I learned to be a better listener for a start. And young people, yeah.
Are you working with kids from difficult situations?
No, no, not at all.
Any
Well,
kid?
there seems to be a whole mixture of there are kids that are in social unease. There are others who are excel and they're super up there. They're fan. So the well-to-do, the really high achievers want to do even better by learning more about life and universe and discussing the. I think as a mentor, apart from being a better listener, I've learned to delve into their issues and provide a listening ear and provide questions that helps them maybe come up with different points of view. Because okay, they get points of view from their teachers and of course their parents and their peers, but this random person called Arek Sinanian comes along. I don't know them from a bar of soap. And they don't know me. But just like this conversation with you, Ed, it can go anywhere, and that's the wonderful thing about. I love that. The wonderful thing about sitting down with a random person, discussing some really deep issues, whether it's social, educational, psychological, whatever. But the other thing that's drummed into us by the Raise Foundation is I'm not their therapist. I'm not their parent. I'm not their teacher. I'm just this old wise man who's lived a life and brings in a different point of view, perhaps. And I have found that as a mentor, have found that exceptionally satisfying. And at the end of the year, there's a ceremony where the mentee gives their appreciation and thank you for the interactions we've had. And I usually end up in tears at the end of it because they show such gratitude, such appreciation of my random input into their wonderfully complex life.
So this is a mentor program, and you get what, one student a year, one person, one child a year?
Oh, you can choose to have as many as you like, but
Oh, I see. Okay.
I've just I think I've only had one for the last 3 years. I've got another one this year. I'm really looking forward to that, but I could choose to do more than one. Yeah.
So um, I spend a lot of time interacting with 20s and 30-year old people, and I'm actually writing a novel that's focused on their age group. So I'm with you on the novel writing thing. What I'm curious about is what you have learned from these young people. That
Oh,
what was surprising to you that you didn't know, or that now has become part of your own kind of bank of knowledge that you live with day to day.
good question. As I said, I've learned well through the through the whole process of the training to start with, but then of course to be the mentor. I've learned to just listen because I think as an engineer and as a man, I've always tried to find solutions to problems. It's just part of my, yeah, uh,
DNA.
um, by DNA, it's
Yeah.
just drummed into me. You know, there's a problem out there. It's like I can imagine myself in Neanderthal time. You know, there's a wildebeest out there. We got to get that because we haven't had dinner for a while. So we've got to work out how to trap that reindeer or whatever.
Yep.
So I've learned to be a better listener without finding solutions,
Uh-huh.
and and I've learned to be a listener and then asking questions to, as I said, to delve deeper into what the problem is. Maybe there's a deeper issue here. Maybe there's a broader problem for the mentee to solve by themselves. With me asking, for instance, they have a problem, X. Okay, what are you doing about X? How is X affecting your life, your work, your relationship with your parents, or whatever? So I've learned to ask relevant questions that delve in and makes them start to think perhaps slightly broader about the problem. Maybe it's not the reindeer. The reindeer is not the problem. It's the river we have to cross to get to the reindeer. So we've got to look at the river and how it's flowing and how it's affecting how it's stopping us getting to the reindeer. Whatever. I'm just making this up as I go. So the question then, so there's a series of, so it gets my brain going as to where do I lead without necessarily going towards the solution. I don't know the solution to their problem. For example, one of my mentees, I can't divulge too much. I can't give names or anything. One of my mentees was a divergent, was a non-binary person. So here I am. I mean, I've never dealt with non-binary. So I had to think laterally, even before I even asked the question. What? So I said, well, how is this, very, very basic questions. How is this affecting you? Are you having problems with this? How are your friends dealing with that? How are your parents dealing with it? Etc. So once, but of course, then depending on their responses to my very, very basic questions, then that gets me thinking about, oh, okay, well, so we go places where even I haven't been before, and that's so exciting. It's wonderful because, yeah, because that's when my creativity and my, I guess, my experience, life experience, comes into play.
You are describing what I have experienced as well. But what I also found, in dealing with my own generation, I'm a baby boomer, is that they are very, people in our age bracket tend to be very critical of young people,
Mm. Yeah.
and they say, oh, they're always scrolling, or they don't have good work habits, or they're always complaining about something.
Mm.
And I tell to them, I tell my peers, well, they're functioning in the world that you created. And so you are responsible for creating the system that makes them not functioning well. And they don't want to hear that because they think that our generation thinks that we did a pretty good job of creating the world that we live in. Well, it's not working. So when I say that to young people, and I talk with them almost daily, I use this phrase, and it's going to be the title of my novel. I use this phrase that we have given you answers to questions that never were asked.
Yeah.
And when I say that to a 25-year-old or a 22-year-old or a 28-year-old, they go, "Oh yeah, that's exactly the way it is." So they feel all this pressure to kind of comply with all the demands, their expectations that older generation. It's just not baby boomers they're having to feel some kind of obligation. They also feel it towards Gen X, and maybe even if they're Gen Z, they feel it towards millennials too. And so there's what I'm where I'm leading is I think that there is a deep conflict between the generations because we've never really come to grips with what does it mean to be the age that we are in.
Spot on. Thank you, Ed, because you've hit on us on an area that I did some research in when I was writing my novel. Sorry, it's not a novel. It's nothing fictional in it at all. A climate for denial. I was doing research on the cognitive reasons for denial of the science of climate change. And what I found was this cognitive dissonance that baby boomers have. Because in fact, the book on climate denial starts off as an apology to the next generation, because I agree with you. We created these problems, and not just climate change, but many other issues that we can talk about. But when it came to climate change, baby boomers, the deniers, and I'm not saying this myself. This is there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of scientific research that's been done to indicate that part of the problem of the well, part of the reason for denying the climate science is actually guilt. Part of the reason is because we've created this world where we are burning fossil fuel faster than anything the industrial revolution started the ball rolling, and from then on we're making the whole thing much worse. And in denying that this is happening, is basically pushing the problem away, because I even spoke to a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, I'm just an engineer, but I've learned a lot about the psychology of it, because psychologists tell me that denial is the first form of defense for pushing a complex problem aside. Because if you deny it's happening, you don't have to deal with it anymore.
Okay,
Um,
see that.
and they even talked about, and it was very disturbing to hear it. For instance, domestic violence. Victims of domestic violence often deny that it's even happening to them, because it's so painfully difficult for them to accept that it's happening. So denial is a form of dealing with highly complex and difficult issues, because and that when it comes to climate change, it turns out denial is one way we can deal with it. Yeah. So yeah, look, I think I agree with you. I think young people, uh, teenagers all the way to 20s, etc., are having to deal with very, very complex issues. And I'm just so glad that I can do my tiny bit through this mentoring system. I'm not sure what well, the feedback I get from the mentees indicate that I'm having some positive impact, and it's a lovely feeling. It's great. And I must say, I have to be honest, and I hope that my sons are going to listen to this. I hope that I had learnt how to be a better listener as a parent. But it's different, it's different being a parent, because you want to fix the problems of your children. Even now, my sons are in their 30 plus, and I'm still trying to solve their problems. But I've learned to just listen to them much more than I have been, without offering solutions, letting them find the solutions, but hopefully asking the right questions.
Yeah, I have three over 30 and one that's in his 40s, and yeah, I get that, and we talk a lot. Um,
That's,
and
isn't
I
that
don't
great?
I don't really advise them any longer because they know their own minds, and I raised them to be that way. I mean, I raised them in the sense that when they were young, I mean, when my oldest was probably 10 or 11, and my youngest was 5 or 6, 7. And I started treating them like adults because I
Mm.
wanted them to think like an adult, not like a child.
Yeah.
And so they would say, they would, there'd be some situation going on, and they'd say, why did she say that? She was talking about, they're talking about somebody, some public figure, something like that. I said, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
And I asked them to tell me what they thought. And over time, they began to think more clearly. And
Mm.
I recognized that they gained a sense of perspective that wasn't always congruent with mine.
Yeah.
But
And
that's okay.
agency. I think we're talking about agency, aren't we?
Yeah,
Yes.
we are talking about agency, and I think that's one of the challenges that we face in our world is that people do not feel like they have any agency, and
Yeah.
that they and working with their phones, is not agency.
No. That's
It's
what I was saying
actually
earlier.
accomplishing something, doing something tangible, and like what you're doing with the Raise Foundation. I think that's a very tangible sort of thing.
Mm.
And I would be interested, in another 10, 15 years to interview your mentees to see how did this program or how did your relationship with them impact them in such a way that it prepared them for some situation that they were now in. And they say, I look back on conversations we had, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful because you really helped me to be prepared for this situation that now is upon me.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting when, when you asked your child, what do you think? Now that's such a simple question, but it puts it switches. He's asking, my son's asking me, what do you think, Dad? My friend did whatever situation. But if I now turn it around and say, what do you think? How did that make you feel? Very, very simple questions. And it just switches the role, if you like. And to talk about switching roles, my sons are now offering me advice. Of course they are. They're telling me how to do things. And I love that. I love the fact that I've switched the roles, and now they feel as though they can give me advice, which is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to interview my mentees in a few years' time, because as I reflect on my childhood, there have been moments, and just moments, when something very simple has happened, something very fundamental has happened that has changed. I remember, relatives, aunts or uncles or whoever, saying things, and I still remember the moment. I still remember the circumstance that it happened in. And these very, very simple moments that can change things are very, very important. And I guess what I'm hoping for is that I have had such an influence on my mentees by just asking one simple question, or one uh, going in one particular direction with their issue or their problem. Maybe I've changed something for the better. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Last Friday, I was at a mixer. I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Went to Charlotte for this mixer, and it was almost all young people in their 20s and 30s. And
Right.
and the woman who was convening this mixer, I knew, and I had her on the podcast. She's a poet, and I interviewed her a year ago, and she was so excited to see me. She said, "Would you be willing to speak?" I said, "If you want me to speak, I'll be glad to speak. What do you want me to say?" And and I didn't know what to say, and so I stood up and I said, um, I said three things. I said to them, I said, "Be careful how you identify yourself, because you're more than what your identity is. Whatever you perceive yourself to be, you're more than that, and you want to be free to be all that you can be. The second thing is that you you need to be asking more questions than you're giving answers
Mm,
because your questions are going to help other people to ask questions, and there you're going to be able to find that you can maybe forge a relationship where you can be solution creators together. And then I said the last thing is you want to make sure that you're clear about what your values are. And I'd had a situation years ago where I was working with a woman who had left the company that she was working for, started her own company. It was the beginning of COVID. Her husband was sent home to work. He's in the financial services industry, and she had two children. And in the time period, she's had three more. So she's or two more. She's got four children. And but what we were talking about was I feel like I have to say yes to everything. And I said, well, you don't have to say yes to everything. You can say no to things, but you need to be clear about why you're saying no. And the no needs to have a yes to it. I mean, you have to have some reason that's a yes for you, a value that enables you to say no. No, I'm not going to do that because of this. And what she found, and I think this is what these young people also found was when you have that kind of clarity of thought or clarity of purpose, that you can find yourself less anxious and less fearful and all those sort of things. So I'm curious as to how you see the young people that you work with dealing with the world at large and whether they have a sense of hope about the future, because I hope they would, but I find that there's a lot of fear, and this is what I was trying to address with them.
mm. Well, I find there's a mixture with the kids that I've been involved with. There's a mixture of fear, trepidation, but also optimism. Because young people are optimistic, they think they can do everything. But I try to tell them that, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for because you don't feel as though you got to have you have to have answers for everything yet. You don't have. I don't have the answers to it. I've lived all this life, and I've studied, and I'm still learning. And learning is such a wonderful thing. Because you're developing. But you mentioned the core values. One thing I've learned. Um, is to not only identify I mean, you have to identify who you are, your core values, ethical, moral value system, and live your life according to those core values. Live every day according to I mean, if, people say, oh, well, if you ask the average person, well, who do you want to be? What sort of a person? Of course, they will say, well, I want to be an honest, kind person or whatever they want, creative or successful or whatever. So, okay, so these are your values. Or so how are you living to those values? How are you making sure that you are living? Because if you don't do that, there's this core need to be this and the A, B, and
Yeah,
C. But if you're living a life that's different to that, there's a cognitive dissonance
that's
there.
right.
There's a, there's a part of you that wants to be an honest person, but not in real life, you're not being honest because you're doing this and that and the other. If you want to be creative, well, what creative activities are you doing? If you want to be kind, where are you showing your kindness to the rest of the world? How are you doing that? Where are you being kind about? So these are the sort of questions that I don't put this on the mentee necessarily. Just depends what issues they're dealing with. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions,
Sure.
Ed. What is your background? Who are you?
Well, I am a human being to begin with.
Wonderful. That's great to know.
Um,
What's been your work, your sort of professional or
it's been all
I
over the
know, I
map.
know, I know you have a PhD, but I don't know what it is in.
Actually, it's not a PhD. I began my career as a Presbyterian minister,
I see.
but I found that being a parish minister, pastor of a church, wasn't well suited to me because I was a change agent. I wanted to change things, and
Yeah.
churches are like all institutions, all organizations. They don't want to change. They want to improve. They want to do really well, but they don't want to have to change to do really well. I mean, there's a certain cognitive dissonance about the way organizations function in our world today. So I spent, I guess, 10 years doing that, and then I moved into higher education for 7 years, and then in 1995, our family moved back to North Carolina where we lived, and I started a consulting practice and a leadership and focused on leadership. And as a product of that, I began to create a leadership model and apply that leadership model in terms of doing planning and doing problem solving and that sort of thing. And and then I became a writer. Was asked to be the business leadership writer for a local newspaper, and I started podcasting, not podcasting, but weblogging, and then I 10 years ago or 11 years ago I closed my practice because I was tired of being lied to by, people would hire me and we'd go through all this and they would be wasting their money on me because they would never act on the things that we put together.
Mm.
So, and so then I started writing full time, basically,
Yeah.
and I still am, and then podcasting started 3 years ago. But
So
I've
what's your next project? What are you writing about now?
well, what happened was I became interested in leadership in 1984.
Wow.
I was a community minister, an urban community minister working for a church, and my parish, so to speak, was everything outside the doors of the church. So I had businesses and urban residents, homeless people, alcoholics, the full gamut of people who live in that. They were my parish, and I got invited to join a business association board, and it was a large organization with 45 members on the board, and I was the clergy representative. And I had never seen a group of people. This is 45 people working as one. I'd never seen that before, and my response was, "Oh, so this is what leadership is about."
Mm.
And
Fantastic.
I credit the young woman who was the executive director of being able to convince, not convince, but to facilitate an awareness of how the unity of this board was going to be beneficial to the entire community that we were representing. And so that's where that started. And then a year ago, right now, a year ago, I started a sabbatical because I had been writing on leadership for all these years, and I had been writing to prepare the follow up to my first book, and I just wasn't pleased with it. I felt like I was just repeating myself, so I said I'm going to go take a sabbatical from writing for 3 months. It turned out to be 4 months, and I focused on the theme of time and reality, and and out of that emerged the idea of writing a novel about a young man, 18 years old, whose parents were killed in an airplane crash when he was 3. So he's disconnected from his parents. So he doesn't really have any experience with his parents other than they're absent. And so he sets off. He drops out of college. He sets off to find out the story of his parents. And what I'm doing is that I've placed him in a relationship with four men who are influential in his life. His two grandfathers, his oldest brother, and a college professor he had for the one semester. And each one of them have answers, have perspectives, and it's not that he's walked away from that, but he's just not living off of those answers. He's going to go find out his own answers because he's going to ask his own questions. And and so
Fantastic.
the
Wow. Love it.
novel becomes one of intrigue, one of conspiracies,
And exploration.
and exploration. So
Yeah. Wow.
and I'm writing it, and it will appear in a serialized form later this year. So,
Fantastic. I love it because it has some similarities to the story that I'm writing. Because I'm trying to write the story of my father, as I said to you earlier, who became an orphan at the age of 4 because of the genocide. And as you said, he didn't have the basis on which one starts to build because we need some sort of a platform of our parents and their story so that we can build our own story from our parents' story because that gives us some form of identity and we need an identity. But as an orphan at the age of 3 in your case and at the age of 4 in my father's case, where does one start to build the building blocks of this of a life or an identity?
what he was given by his father's parents raised him and his
Mm,
siblings,
mm.
and what they gave him was generational memory. So the
Yeah.
grandfather um, would talk about three or four generations in the past, and the grandfather, because he knew the boy was going to be an only child because he was 3 and all his other siblings were at least 6 years older. So he treated him as an only child and basically treated him as a trainee. And so when he got to 18, he was far more mature and far more adequate for dealing with the world than most of the people his age. And so but that generational memory is what is guiding him to make decisions about what is true and what is not about his parents,
Mm.
and how to relate to his both sets of grandparents and his siblings and his aunts and uncles. And it's an interesting. So all that is built into this because I it's really in many ways not just the story of this one boy. It's also a story of their whole family and how they respond to the loss of a significant loss of both parents
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
one night. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had to write it down because I didn't want to forget it. Generational memory. But so Ed, what was the seed for this story of yours? Where does that come from? Where did it come from?
It has come from talking to 20 somethings and finding out
Ah.
that they are not really clear on who they are or what they should be doing with their lives. And
Mhm.
and so when I use the title of the book, Answers to Questions Never Asked, they'll go, "Oh yeah, that's exactly the way it is." So they're telling me that they don't have a clear sense of who they are, and I'm telling them, "You already know who you are. What you don't understand is how does it fit into the world that exists."
Yeah.
And that's what is the challenge is, um, if you how do you fit who I already know who I am into my phone, into the people, the connections that I have in my phone. It's a very great challenge. So, but I'm also writing this story pre-digital era because I,
Mm.
I want people to understand. So if you were looking for someone, let's say someone in your family has been missing for 15 years and you don't have the internet, how are you going to find them?
mm,
That's,
mm.
it's these sorts of things that may bring a sense of reality back to the world that you and I grew up with.
Yes.
And because it would be a challenge to say, okay, like there's a member of my family who's a cousin who's probably 15 or 20 years older than me, and we've lost track of him. And
Mm,
he's not online, and his phone numbers don't connect, and we don't know what's going on with him.
mm,
And
mm.
we've been trying to find him for a couple of years. And, we check the newspapers, there's no obituary, so we don't really know what's going on. So that's the kind of questions that I think some of us find as we go through our lives.
Yeah, yeah. Well, well, and you've answered my second question because I was going to ask you, when you went to this mixer or whatever, and you said there were 20s and 30-year-olds there. I was going to ask you what are their issues? I mean, my mentoring is mainly sort of teenage years, whereas I'm sure the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds have a slightly different set of challenges.
They have financial challenges. They have challenges of finding a mate, finding someone to marry, or if
Mm,
they have married, having children. Many of them are having difficulty conceiving. I mean,
yeah,
these are all kind of real problems that a lot of
yeah,
young people in their 20s. And what is the cause of this? I think anyone. I think there are a lot of environmental causes and social causes and
yeah,
personal
yeah,
causes. So, my goal is to not try to answer those questions, but rather to affirm them and appreciate them and say, you can figure this out. You're not
mm,
stupid. You're not, um, you don't have to feel like you're obligated to anyone in the sense that you have to do what they say you do. You need to ask your own questions and come up with your own answers and share that with your friends and see how these things work together, and what that is, what they're telling me when I say that to them is exactly what you're discovering in your mentoring relationships, which is there is kind of a mutuality between us that
yes.
we give it, our give and take is mutual, and we care about each other mutually, and that strengthens our ability to kind of look at life and look at the world as we face it and say, okay, we can deal with this. Okay, yeah,
And as you're saying, I'm sure, Ed, is that what I try to impart to my mentee is don't be afraid to ask
yeah.
for help. Don't be afraid to ask some difficult questions or simple questions, but also to see that inquiry and seeking help is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Mhm.
It's not you're not meant to have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. So don't be afraid to ask because that's not a weakness. Because I think a lot of young people, particularly through social networking or whatever, can be made to feel a lesser person if they keep whinging and asking questions or asking for help. It's not seen, I mean, because we live in a world where we think we have all the answers, but we don't actually. I don't have, and it's interesting. You mentioned this little thing here. Whenever it's really the new generation, the teenagers and even the 20-year-olds these days. I ask them a question, and the first thing they do is they grab their phone. Have you noticed that? It's quite. It's like it's their little helper. It's their constant companion to come to their rescue at every corner. It's quite
I
fascinating. But
I I worked very hard to capture their attention so that they won't have to go to their phone. And and they they do not realize until they've had that kind of interaction with someone that there is something really valuable about a direct engagement with another human being.
Yeah, and it goes back to my very first point of connection. And the other fear I have, and it may be not founded at all. The other fear is that AI is now giving the impression or giving the false impression that it has even more answers. So if there is a tendency to go to this thing here, now AI is starting to make young people feel as though it's even more powerful. Even got more answers. It's all here. AI has got all the answers, or they've got all the solutions here. Well, I still think it lacks the connectivity with
Agree.
people because the solutions are not always, well, hardly ever technical. The solutions are much deeper than that. The solution, the difficult solutions involve people, involve emotions, involve ethics and morality, and AI just hasn't quite worked that one out yet.
I tell not just 20 somethings, but I tell everyone that they need to be very skeptical of every message and every piece of information that they are given. And I tell them, you should be skeptical of me. You should ask questions whether what I'm saying to you is true. You should ask that question. And I would
Yeah,
like you to ask that question directly to me. Because I think that it goes back to what I was doing with my children, which is, so what do you think? And when a person can begin to say, I don't quite believe what I'm hearing, I say, well, okay, hold on to that thought. And then try to figure out why is it that you don't quite believe what you're hearing. And once they begin to kind of learn how to ask those questions, then they begin to see things differently. I have a model or a tool that I where I distinguish between the culture of simulation and the culture of reality. And the culture of simulation is really a simulated reality, which is intended to seduce us into kind of a suspended state of thought. And
yeah,
we go along to get along, and we go along thinking that someone else has all the answers and I don't have any of them. And so we become dependent upon all the messaging that we're getting through all these different sources. And what I say, in talking about that, I say to people is what you should decide to do is what is it that I want to do, not what I want to believe. What is it I want to do? And then go see if you can do it. Try it. Test everything. And what you'll find is that there are certain things you didn't know you could do that you can do.
yeah.
And you'll find
And and while you're testing everything, just make interrogate to make sure that whatever you're doing is based on fact or that based on evidence, defend and dependable evidence, so that what you're doing has a solid basis. I mean, as an engineer, I rely heavily on scientific knowledge and scientific fact, not scientific belief. In fact, I try to avoid the word belief because belief has some sort of a trust. I mean, you may believe in a God, but you can't believe in facts. You accept facts because if they are based on scientifically verified and proven facts, then you're on solid ground. Otherwise, you're on very shaky ground. So whatever actions you take from then on is going to be shaky, as you said. Yeah.
So
So,
let me ask you this last question. And it's one I typically ask my guests. So do you have hope for the future? And if so,
absolutely,
what is it?
absolutely,
What's it based
absolutely.
on?
Absolutely, because I believe, I'll go back to my very first statement, I think. I believe in humanity, Ed. I believe that humans, I mean, yes, we go through all these difficult times, pandemics, whatever, financial, economic, political difficulties. And yes, we are going through a difficult time at the moment for all sorts of reasons. But I believe that eventually, I don't know when, I think humanity finds a way out. We have done through history. So I am an optimist, and that's what keeps me going, to be honest. If I did not have trust in humanity, trust in my fellow men and women that I work with and I'm connected with, I'd be in big trouble. And why do I feel that? I guess history, because we are here. We are here. We would not have made it here without connectivity, without working together. I mean, way back in Neanderthal times, we were a community. We worked together to survive, and we would not have made it to 2026 had we not worked together eventually. Maybe got in trouble here and there, maybe destroyed each other here and there, killed each other for no reason at all. By the way, I absolutely abhor violence and war, so it really disturbs me what I see today. But I think we will find a way out. We will find it. So I'm an optimist. Let's go. Let's do it.
I'm glad to hear
Let's
that.
let's connect, and that's why I'm connecting with you. And this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure we could have gone on for another few hours,
I'm sure
but
we could.
yeah,
Well,
I really,
thank
I
you for
really
joining.
appreciate what you're doing, Ed. Thank you so much for having me as part of this.
My pleasure, and we thank you all for watching. And I hope that you're encouraged by this, and that you're going to go ask more questions and go track down someone in their 20s and say, "Can I ask you a question?" And
Yeah,
see if
yeah,
you can start a conversation which is mutual and
yeah.
beneficial to both of you. So,
And find some common ground. Yes, absolutely.
so thank you for
Fantastic.
watching,
Well,
and
thank you.
we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.